Welcome back, everyone, to Gear Gods Presents Studio Pass with Kurt Ballou here on Creative Live. We're excited to get back into this, the final segment, well, sadly the final segment of this workshop, but we are going to, really quick beforehand, say thank you to some of the people who actually made this thing happen. It takes a huge team to actually put together one of these workshops and make it happen, so we'd like to say thank you, first of all, to Gear Gods. Finn, do you want to talk about them?
Sure. So if you guys are familiar with Metal Sucks or Metal Injection, the same guys behind those sites put together the site geargods.net, and I would like you to go visit geargods.net right now so they can see how much traffic we drive their way. So this is the world's first heavy music gear site, so it's exactly what you think. It's people nerding out over guitars and amps and blah, 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 interviews with his favorite musicians. Had Kurt on there for NAMM. So we love the guys over at Metal Sucks and Metal Injection. We love Gear Gods, and if you're watching this, you'll probably love Gear Gods as well. So please head to geargods.net and poke around. Thank you very much to Matt and Ben and everybody else over there for their support.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very awesome. Thank you. We want to say thank you to Nice Hooves, who allowed us to actually use their music to learn from, so that it wasn't just like, hey guys, here's a pre-created sample to work from. No, this was real world, real life. This is something that Kurt actually put together. So thank you very much to those guys. Check them out. Nicehooves.com. Check out their website. Check out the music. They've got their first single that is available for free. So check that out. And thanks again to them. I want to say a big thank you to you guys out there, the Creative Live audience. We're still fairly new here in the audio and music channel, and we love that you guys are getting excited about this and about what we're doing here. This is new. This is not something that has been found really before in the music community. And do you want to talk a little bit about just the audience and about, how awesome they've been?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much for watching this, because as we all know, that none of this is possible without the support of everyone watching. And also thank you very much for being so positive and supportive and awesome in the chat rooms. We all know that the culture of online recording discussion is not always as positive and supportive as we would like it to be. And so far it has been here in the Creative Live audio channel, and that means a lot to me, because we're all here to do the same thing, which is make the best music we possibly can. We're already weird enough. We don't need to make it worse by alienating each other. So thank you very much for being such a great, positive community.
I agree. Love it. And a big thank you to the crew here at Creative Live, who we can't do this without, because literally you wouldn't be able to see me right now if people hadn't set up that camera that is looking at us right now. The crew here is awesome. They are people who are not just really good at their job, but also just a lot of fun to hang out with. So thank you to the crew. The audio channel is kind of giving them new challenges, and so we're excited to see how they are rising to that challenge and making it all look good and sound good and work for you guys at home. So thank you to the crew, who are all awesome. Big thank you to the in-studio audience here, these 6 gentlemen who have been with us for these 2 days. It's been great to have you guys. It's been intimidating. My beard is terrified of some of you, because it just feels like less of a beard. But I've loved having you guys here. It's been good to have your questions, your enthusiasm, and I know that Kurt enjoys looking at your beautiful faces. So thank you for being here. And I want to say the biggest thank you of all, of course, to Kurt Ballou, who takes what is a subject that is not always, again, not something that is like publicly accessible to a lot of people, and you've made it very understandable. You've given people inspiration and taken what, again, something that I say a lot, but I actually really do feel, is that there are people, because we bring in working professionals, we don't bring in just straight up educators here. And so the working professionals that we bring in, it's sometimes hard to actually communicate how you do what you do. And so we love people like Kurt, who are able to really take what is a very technical art form and make it understandable. And so thank you for the hard work that you've put into this, and for your smiling face throughout it.
Well, thank you for all the kind words. I really appreciate that. And of course, Nice Hooves, the studio audience, great bunch of guys, and everybody here at Creative Live, and of course the people watching at home. So thanks everybody. I'm honored and touched that people are interested in what I'm doing enough that I've been able to do this.
Absolutely. Well, once again, thank you. We're going to get right back into that segment. I'm going to bring the clicker over to you, Kurt, so that you can so that you can
Sure.
take it away.
Give me clicker.
Here you go.
And just one more word about this whole thing that Creative Live is doing. Initially, my first thought on it was like, wow, this is super cool. And if I had a chance to see something like this when I was starting out, I would have really jumped on it. And that's kind of one of the main reasons why I agreed to do it. I've really had a whole lot of fun doing this and kind of organizing my thoughts and working with my friends in Nice Hose in putting this thing together. So it's been really fun, and thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope you got something great out of it. And if you haven't, that's okay too. I just want to also say that I think a lot of the experiences of people in any sort of organized counterculture movement, whether it be metal or hardcore like I tend to work in, or if it's motorcycles or a foodie underground culture or whatever that is, even though the subject matter that binds us together is different, I think a lot of the experiences these people share is similar, in the way that affects our humanity is similar. So if you don't really care for the music that I do, that's totally fine, and know that what I do is not for everybody, and I might not care about the kind of stuff that you're into, but that's okay. I think that we can find a way to relate to each other and share in the human experience through music, even if the type of music we like is different. So hopefully you find something valuable in this, and it helps you explore the music that you like more. So that being said, all the sentimental stuff out of the way, let's get back into the final segment, which is about the full mix treatment. Let's go to the slides on that. And the first thing I want to talk about actually is about the timeless nature or the time-bound nature of the music that you're working on. When I'm making records, I realize that sort of trends come and go, and both in terms of musical styles and production styles. I try to be aware that the music that I'm making in 2014 will not only be listened to in 2014, but hopefully will have legs and continue to be listened to for many years. So as I'm making my aesthetic choices, I try to make choices that are not gimmicky and will not later in history be locked into a certain time period. So there may be things that are super trendy to do right now, and you may choose to do them if that's what your client wishes, but I urge all of you to think about what you love about music today, and also all of the music of the past that you enjoy, and what is it about that music that really wets your whistle. Is it a certain production aesthetic, or is it the songs? And what can you learn from the past that you can impart on the present, and what can you do in the present that's not going to damage this music's listenability in the future? Okay, so the first thing to talk about when doing a mix is how you're going to interact with your clients. Clients really hate being kept out of the loop. It is important that you get a chance to work on some stuff on your own where you don't have somebody leaning over your shoulder, but let them know that. Let them know that it's important for you to have some quiet time on your own to get the mix started and kind of happening, and get a vibe for the mix going when you're not thinking about the person looking over your shoulder. You might be focusing on dialing in the guitar tone, but all the person in the back of the room can hear is this like annoying hi-hat thing happening, and their focus on that can distract your focus in that moment. So I think it's generally a good idea, unless you really require a lot of interaction from your clients. Get started on your own. Let them know that that's how you want to work, and then when you get to a point where you're either totally stumped and don't know what to do, or you're reasonably happy, maybe 85% happy with how things are feeling, then bring in the client and start soliciting opinions from them. But also make sure they understand approximately what kind of schedule you're on. Say like, hey, give me all day tomorrow to work on it on my own. I'll get you some rough mixes tomorrow night. Don't leave them in the dark, or they'll feel confused, and you don't want to do anything that's going to cause your client to lose trust in you. You always want to make sure you foster an open relationship with them and build trust with them, because the more that they trust in you, the easier and better your working relationship will be. Okay, so your clients have a good understanding about what you're going to do. You have done all of your pre-mix work. You got your turbo tracks set up. You've got sort of some rudimentary automation set up on overheads and room mics, so you're following sort of the character of the song with that kind of stuff. You have your reverb sends that you want to use already set up, and your palette of vocal effects ready to go. You haven't necessarily applied a whole lot of them yet, but there's a palette ready to go, and then you start auditioning. Gear. One thing that I like to do actually right before I start auditioning gear is determine what my panning philosophy for the song will be. And I think about this a lot based on, first, on the quantity of guitar tracks I have. If I have a mono guitar track that's going to be panned, say, in the center, I might set up my drum set to sound super wide, or maybe even hyper-realistically wide. If I'm going for a hyper-realistic wide drum sound, I probably tracked it that way with the figure 8 overhead sort of aimed at the opposite side of the kit, so I can really super hard pan the cymbals. If I have a really dense mix of loud guitars, loud compressed sort of steady state guitars that are going to be hard panned, then my drum sound is going to be a little bit more in the center. I might even use a mono overhead, or maybe I only used a mono room mic, or maybe I have my 2 stereo room mics panned in quite far. And that's what I ended up doing on this Nice Hooves record. The toms are kind of hard panned, not hard panned, but the toms are kind of wide, but then with each successive instrument happening, or each successive element in time of the drums happening, it gets narrower and narrower. So the really close stuff in the drum set is happening in kind of a wide panning space, not hard pan, but a little on the wide side. Then the next thing that happens in time is the overheads. And then the final thing that happens in time is the room mics, which are much closer to the center. So you have, over time, it sort of does this and has a focus. You might want to take the complete opposite approach depending on the density of your guitars, and you might want to have a panning scheme that goes out like that. I find that in my studio with the diffused room mics that I use, it's really easy to make the 2 room mics feel disconnected from one another. So I tend to mix those closer to the center. The other thing that you want to think about is, particularly within the overheads, is where your pan controls are set is not really where the overhead panning really is, because there's always going to be crosstalk between the overhead mics, the left side of the overheads and the right side of the overheads if you're doing stereo overhead. So if you have your overhead pan set at 50%, the perception of that might only be 20%. So sometimes even like with if you're using like an XY type or Boomline microphone directly over the kit, the stereo image of that is much more narrow inherently, even if it's hard pan, than if you have 2 figure 8s sort of spread out over the kit. So keep that in mind as you're setting your overhead pan. And then the other thing to talk about is stylistic panning. Sometimes people are trying to paint a picture of, an organic image of what the band really sounds like when you're feeling that band playing live in front of you. But then other people don't care about that, and they're trying to present a more stylized version of what the song is. Maybe you're thinking about listening on headphones more than you're thinking about listening on speakers. You want to have a singer sort of whispering in your ear for a section, or you might want to have the drum set almost feel like it's double tracked and super hard panned. Like some of the I love this band called Piss Jeans. I've never had a chance to work with them, but I know they have some records, and I don't think they double track the drums, but it almost sounds like there's no kick and snare in the middle. It's like real super wide, and it's an interesting sort of stylized approach. And so you got to decide if that's right for the song, or if more of like a organic, realistic representation of the band is right for the song. So once you've determined your panning philosophy, one more thing about panning before I forget is dealing with the mono guitar. If you have a band that's just one guitar player and they don't want to double themselves, there's a few things that you can do to deal with that. One, just mix it in mono straight up the middle. That's fine if you want to do that, but your center channel stuff can start getting cluttered. So maybe you might want to do a super wide drum set thing, or maybe you want to double the vocals or put a bunch of chorus on the vocals to make the vocals wide. You can do a rim mic, a mono rim mic on the guitar, pan the close mic to one side, and pan the rim mic to the other side, like a Van Halen style thing. You can do a pseudo doubler. A popular way to do that in the 80s and 90s was with a Lexicon PCM42, which is a delay, but it also has this like limiter built into the front end of the delay. And I think it's like a 12-bit type digital processor, so it really changes the tone of the thing coming into it. So between the tonal shift and the limiter, if you have like your original guitar hard pan to one side and then the delayed version of it going through the PCM42 on the other side, it really does feel almost like there's two guitars coming to you. And you can do other things too. You can do subtle pitch variations. You can do other subtle delays and compression effects to make one guitar feel like a widespread stereo guitar. But if you do choose to do that, make sure you always check your mix in mono because you want to make sure that there's always a mono compatibility with any mix that you do. A lot of TV sets, for example, if your song was played on television, a lot of TVs are mono. So you want to make sure that things don't collapse or sound weird if your song is played over mono. And also, if somebody has like a stereo system and they're sitting right in front of it, yeah, they're hearing stereo, but the further they get from it, the more, because the speakers just from their perspective are getting closer and closer together, it essentially becomes mono at a distance. So if you use some sort of pseudo doubler effect, sometimes it feels natural when you're up close, but then when you get far away, it's got this weird chorused sound. So be careful about doing that. It's always a little bit of a challenge, and sometimes I'll just kind of force people to double track their guitars just to avoid that that headache of dealing with the mono guitar. But mono guitar is certainly not wrong, and if that's what works for the song, awesome. I talked yesterday a little bit about the headphones versus speakers thing, and that's about recognizing that when you're listening to something on headphones, you're listening in an unnatural environment where there's not crosstalk between the left and right speaker. So you might want to add some reverb or room mics to your guitars so that the guitars don't feel awkwardly isolated in any one channel. All right, so working with effects, short versus long reverb. I like to set up a number of reverbs, usually 2 to 3 reverbs in my mix. So I have a short reverb that I use to sort of add ambience to the mix and gel or glue the band together, make it feel like it's all coming from the same place. Sort of a similar role to what room mics do, but with a little bit more control. And I also like to use a long reverb for more special effects type of things. And I find that I'm sending sometimes lead guitar, sometimes snare or toms, sometimes vocals, sort of depends on the style of the music. A lot of like the metal recordings I love from the 80s and 90s have some like real super long reverbs, and if I'm trying to conjure up that feeling, I'll grab a super long reverb. Tempo sync delays we sort of covered in the vocal section, so I'll skip over that. And the final thing I'll talk about is gimmicks, which really harkens back to what I was talking about making your songs timeless. We're in Seattle right now, and home of Botch. And I remember Botch put out a record that had a, I forget the name of the song, but it had this like lo-fi guitar, drum, radio thing that happened at the beginning of the song. And like, I hadn't really heard that before, that song. And I was like, whoa, this is fucking cool. And then everybody was like that. And then all of a sudden, over the next 5 years, everybody had lo-fi intros. And it was like, hey, let's mess with the kids and think it's a crappy recording and they'll crank up their stereo, and then when the song comes in, bam! And then everybody was doing that, and it became this like very gimmicky thing. And I think it sort of became married to a certain time period. Like the hidden track on CDs where you had to wait through 10 minutes of silence. Exactly, like, yeah, we get it. We've done this before. And I think the whole like the auto-tune effect thing is going to be that, and if not already, in a few years, people are going to know that is locked into a certain time period. So as bands make requests for that thing, or bass drops or whatever it happens to be aware that those gimmicks are going to be locked into a certain time period. And if they're insistent, trying to come up with a new way to do it. You know, you can do lo-fi intros by running a headphone mix and jamming like a 57 into the headphones and getting it that way. Or you can do it with EQs. You can find some crappy old, like I have this crappy old Krone height filter that's not even audio equipment. It's like test equipment that I'll run stuff through and get that effect. And you know, there's all different ways to do it. So try to do it in new ways all the time. So at least if you're doing a gimmick, you've found a new way to do the gimmicks. You're not just repeating yourself over and over again. And of course, I always discourage that stuff, but I like stuff pretty natural and organic. Other people like stuff more stylized. Okay, so stereo bus processing. I want to spend quite a bit of time on this. I will do a fairly lengthy stereo bus chain. And it's one of those things where if you're not confident about it, you probably shouldn't do it because it starts encroaching on the world of mastering. And just let me tell you what stereo bus processing is. So you're making a mix and you know, you balance out all the various tracks in your mix and then you have some kind of rock and full mix. The dynamic range of that mix is much wider than what a contemporary compact disc or MP3 or whatever will play. Typically, people prefer to reduce that dynamic range, compress the signal, and it's partially to make the perceived volume of that louder, but it's also partially to provide sort of a glue and a cohesiveness that kind of gels the whole mix together. We're starting to sort of go against my philosophy of make your mixes timeless, because I think that hyper compressed mixes are finally starting to go away, and when people hear a hyper compressed super loud mix, they're going to associate that with a certain time period. So be a little bit wary of that, but a tasteful, well planned out stereo bus processing can do wonders for the cohesiveness of your mix. And if you're brave and you want to give it a try, I'm going to give you some tips on what you can do. So the pros for doing it, the main reason that I like to do it is that a mastering engineer is going to do some of that stuff. They're going to be doing a mix of EQing of your full mix, compressing of your full mix, limiting of your full mix, and sometimes they might even add reverb or DES your full mix. And that kind of stuff that they do can be a little bit hard to predict what the results will be from mix to master. If you do a little bit of processing on your own, then you'll have a better prediction of what the mastering engineer is going to do. Even if that processing doesn't get used in your final mix, to do sort of a bit of a fake master on your own mix might help you understand what's going to happen in the mix after it gets mastered. The other reason to do it is if you do some stereo bus processing at your end, then the mastering engineer doesn't have to do as much at their end. They'll process your mix with a lighter touch, and it should give it a greater sense of transparency. The reason not to do it is, especially if you don't have nice quality gear, or you're a little bit confused as to what sounds better or worse, if there's any doubt in your mind, be very wary of doing it, because it does limit what a mastering engineer can do. You're reducing the headroom of your mix when you do the stereo bus processing, so the mastering engineer has less room to work. So an interim solution to that is actually print 2 versions of the mix. Print your version that has the stereo bus processing, that's your best guess as to what it should be, and then also print an unprocessed version of the mix and send both versions to the mastering engineer and let that person choose which version is a better starting point for their master. So the solution that I have, and I kind of messed up actually, I meant to print mixes of my, print versions of my mix with no master bus processing and with master bus processing, so I could illustrate the difference and how that changes my mix. I messed up. I forgot to do it. I apologize for that because I think it's pretty enlightening. So the chain that I've been using over the past couple years for my master bus processing is fairly lengthy. The first thing I go into is a device called an Avison blend, which is actually a wet-dry control of the stereo mix. So it has in and out, but then it also has like a loop in and out, and then there's a crossfader. So it's like you're a DJ. You can just cut and scratch and that stuff. So basically, all the way to the wet side is as if the device is not in the chain at all. All the way to the dry side is as if it's bypassed, and then somewhere in the middle is usually where I live. So what I can do is do some kind of heavy master bus processing, be super heavy-handed and really get a vibe, but then back off on that. It's sort of like the parallel compression technique you hear people talk about a lot with what they're doing on their drums, only I'm doing this on the entire mix. Alan Douch has actually kind of turned me on to this. People do it a lot with SSL consoles or other consoles that have a lot of buses on them, where they'll have kind of like a cleaner bus and then a more affected bus, and then they'll blend the two out their stereo output. I'm doing it with this thing called an Avison blend. So then after the blend, or in the loop of the blend, I have 3 devices. The first one is a TubeTech SMC2B, I believe is the model number, which is a tube compressor, multi-band tube compressor, which allows me to compress the high, mid, and low bands independently of each other. So I'll go in and I'll kind of dial in crossover points. There's 2 crossovers in that. One determines where the separation is between high and mid. Another crossover point determines the separation between mid and low. Kind of dial up what my crossover points are going to be, figure out where I want the high stuff to, or what frequencies I want control of for the highs, the mids, and the lows, and then I'll do some independent compression of each of those. So it lets me, what that means is that, when a snare drum hits, it compresses the mid-range stuff, but it doesn't compress the bass guitar, for example. But when the bass drum and the bass guitar hit, it's not going to cause the cymbals to duck out of the way. So you can have a level that's more range controlled with more transparency, because individual bands are not affecting each other. So that's the thing that really takes my mix from sounding like a rough mix to a finished mix. Following that, I go into an equalizer called the Dangerous Bax EQ, which is a really nice sounding equalizer. It has a high pass filter that I use to remove some rumble. Most speaker systems can't reproduce the ultra sub bass anyway, so just get it out of the way so that it's not driving the compression too much, and it's not in the audible range of most people's stereos, so you don't need it in your mix. I'll also boost a little bit of sparkle with that thing, and I'll boost a little bit of like the high bass with that thing to sort of compensate for the sub bass that I'm removing. So it actually it feels like it has a greater bass content, even though in actuality it's not reproducing fundamental frequencies as low as it did without that EQ in the chain. Then I'll add a little bit of sparkle on top if the mix needs it, and then finally I'm going into a Dramastic Audio Obsidian, which is an SSL style stereo bus compressor. And that's operating at pretty fast settings, but low ratio, and just kind of grabbing the peaks and tucking things in. So what happens a lot in mastering is that things that are steady state, like guitar, the volume of guitar is pretty steady. If you look at the waveform of a guitar, the volume of snare drums and bass drums, you're going up and down all over the place. So combine those and you got all this stuff. So then you start limiting it, and now kicks and snares are getting squashed in. So I like having this Dramastic Audio Obsidian there, so I can do a little bit of that kick and snare squash that I know is going to happen in mastering at my stage. And then because I'm doing that during mixing, I can judge what the final balances of all the instruments are going to be after mastering a little bit better than if I was just guessing how much squash the mastering engineer is going to do. So just quick aside while I'm on that topic, If in doubt, always mix the close mics of the drums a little louder, because if they end up too loud in the final master, the mastering engineer can just squash it a little bit harder and tuck the drums in a little bit more. If the drums are not loud enough, it's a little bit more involved process to try to bring out the drums. So we just stepped you through the 3 pieces of gear in my chain: the Tube Tech, the back CQ, and the Obsidian, and then kind of dial those in to get the mix feeling kind of hot and super rockin', and then go back to my Avison blend, back off on the ratio control, and restore some of the organic, natural feeling of the mix without the 2-bus processing. And then finally, after that, it usually either goes to tape with I have an Ampex ATR 102 half-inch or quarter-inch tape machine, or actually the UAD Ampex plugin is quite good. I've been using that a lot lately. So that's usually the final thing that I do in my mix. All right, and the other thing I should mention is the stereo bus processing. I don't wait until the very end of the process to set that up. I do that sort of in the middle of the mix process. It's actually one of the first things that I'll patch in, and I'll have kind of some basic settings on that I know that I like, and I'll be monitoring through that as I'm making my other mix decisions. So, and a mastering engineer doesn't really have that benefit of being able to rebalance all the individual elements of the mix as they're mastering, but since you have like a bit of a pseudo mastering chain going on now, you still have the opportunity to go back and rebalance all the individual tracks. I also find that using that master bus processing means that your individual tracks do not require as much processing on their own. So now that we've got our master bus processing on there, we want to start listening to the mix as a whole. And at this point, you really want to start filtering out all the tech minutia and start really listening to the song and figure out what the vibe of the song is and what does the song need. Now, you know, I know that you've got great ownership over all of the awesome engineering that you did and all these super creative ways that you came about all of these sounds, but none of that stuff matters anymore. The only thing that matters is what's the best result for the song. You're super proud of yourself that you recorded the snare drum through a vacuum cleaner hose with some weird mic on the other end and all that, but if it sounds stupid in the song, then you don't use it. Simple as that. So listen to the song, listen to the voice of the song, and make sure that everything the song does is supporting the voice, and put yourself in the shoes of the listener and start thinking about how the song emotes and what is going to resonate most with the listener of that song. Okay, now some mix refinement. So once you get yourself to say 85%, or what you think is maybe 85 to 90% of the way there with the mix, now you want to solicit feedback from the client. The first thing you want to know about the mix is, does the client like just the overall vibe? Make sure that the client understands you're not particularly interested yet in if you nailed the guitar solo volume or if the backing vocal volume is perfect. Like that stuff is subjective and not yet important. You want to nail all the objective stuff first, because if there's, if the backing vocal sounds a little bit too loud right now, but then the overall vocal tone is wrong, then once you fix the overall vocal tone, the backing vocal volume might feel like it's in a different place. So try to get really close with all the objective stuff first before you start sweating all of the subjective stuff. So ask the client how they feel about the mix. This is actually probably a good time to play what my first version of this mix was. Actually, you know what? Before we even do that, let's check out my stems, or let's check out my raw tracks, and then let's check out my stems. Okay, so raw in the box tracks, which is not how I work, but should be just level set, basic tracks. All right, cool. Now let's hear what my mix of the drums were. This is a drum stem, so it's a stereo bounce of just the drums coming off my console, and I actually can't remember if this went through my 2-bus chain or not. I think it did. So it's a little more bombastic and a little more edgy than the raw tracks are. I think I did some upper mid boosting, some low mid cutting, and various housekeeping on the tracks. And let's hear the bass stem. And the guitar stem. You can really hear a little bit of bus compression on the guitar. That's sort of just sort of helping tuck the guitar into the mix and keeping it focused. The vocal stem, you should hear some of the effects that were on the vocal.
What on the line? This one's a keeper. Keep digging holes. Deeper, deeper. You'll
I think I did some kind of like lo-fi-ish type effect on the talkie vocal that's doubling the screamed lead vocal. The talking vocal is quite a bit more dynamic than the screamed vocal, so some filtering, a little bit of gain, and a lot of compression on that helped keep it pretty steady so that individual syllables didn't poke in and out. All right, so now let's check out the first mix that I shared with the client. That's not it. Here it is. So that's certainly brighter than the raw tracks are. And there's a tendency, I think, in mixing to just sort of, as you get closer to the finish line, you're listening to things quieter, your ears have a different perspective on it, and you start making things brighter and brighter when you realize that you want stuff to cut through a little bit more, and the size and the depth of it isn't as important to you. And especially too as you start to sort of pare down where your bottom end is coming from. So I sent that mix to the band, and talking to a few of the guys in the band, and they each had some of their own ideas about things that irked them about it, and they referenced their previous record that I also recorded as something that they wanted to push it in that direction. This recording was a little bit more organic and unprocessed sounding than their previous record was, so they said, hey, throw on the previous record, take a listen to it. It's a little bit more Hollywood sounding, a little more crispy on top, and a little less mid-ranging. We don't want to go entirely in that direction, but we want to push it a little bit more in that direction. So then I got the two guys that I was talking to in the band to kind of agree upon what it was they wanted me to do before proceeding, because if one person has one idea about what they want to do and another person has a different idea what they want to do, then you don't really know what you should do, and you can sort of only impart your own taste on the mix. It's important to build consensus with everybody involved who has an opinion and make sure that everybody's on the same page before you start, busting ass to do any mix revisions. So when it came time to the first mix revision, first thing I did was save the previous one, because sometimes you actually pass the mix. Maybe the earlier mix was actually better and the later mixes aren't as good. You want to make sure you always have access to earlier mixes. It's certainly bit me in the ass before that I didn't have my earlier mixes. So make sure you have a copy of your old mixes if you start making changes. So that one's quite a bit more mid-range forward and a little less low-mid type stuff. So again, save your mix, solicit more feedback, try to make sure people are giving you good feedback. At this point, we're getting closer to the vibe, so now we're starting to kind of dial in all the little details. And in this particular song, the real sticking point for them was not so much the tone of the mix, but kind of dialing in exactly how that kind of talking backing vocal fit into the mix. So mostly what you'll hear over the next few mixes is adjustments to that. So I'll just run through those next few mixes kind of quickly. So here's rough 3. And then rough 4. That one's got the talking vocal quite a bit lower. And actually, something you'll notice as you're mixing, which I just reminded of in hearing the difference between 3 and 4, I instantly noticed that 4 was a little bit quieter than 3. And that's because sometimes when you're mixing, you find that like, no one ever says turn that down. People always say turn this up. So you get this sort of race to the finish line with the faders, and then eventually get to a point where you have no headroom left. So once in a while, you find yourself needing to sort of reset, whether that be pull all the faders down and bring them back up, or just say across the board, I'm going to go down 5 decibels on all my faders, or however you choose to approach it. Just be aware that as you approach the end of the mix, you got to be careful about losing the headroom of your mix, because whichever mix bus you're using, whether it's a digital mix bus or an analog mix bus, things are going to get a little different as you start pushing it harder. So let's hear the difference between 4 and 5. Oh wait, do I have something else going? Oops. Hold on. You know what? I had another track going this whole time. Let's go back to. Why is that coming out there? Oh, let's go back to the beginning of this whole mix comparison. So rough 1. Okay. Rough 1 was actually my level set rough mix before we started tracking vocals. So rough 2 is the first one, the first real rough mix with vocals and more processing. All right, that feels better to me. This other thing was, sorry, my mistake. So that one's getting the vibe, but the sort of the bottom end, the low mid, is a little out of control, and it's a little bit round. And then by rough 3, I started getting it a little bit more slick sounding. All right, and then the last couple versions of it are not hugely different, but sort of some of the internal balances vary a little bit. Yeah, so it sounds like on 4, that's when I decided to give myself a little more headroom, which is why you're hearing it a little bit quieter. Yeah, and by rough 5, I can really hear that difference between sort of the bottom end coming into focus from the toms, the kick, and the bass guitar. Guitars are getting out of the way of that bottom end, and then drums are getting out of the way of, the bass EQ, and guitar EQ aren't so much in the same area. And rather than the early rough mix, which seems like, one just big blob of sound, now this, while still sounding like a band, there's a little bit of space carved out more for each instrument. So let's check out the final mix. All right, so that's my final mix. I think it sounds pretty cool. I hope you guys like it. The band seemed to like it. But I'm never happy with anything I do, and this was a pretty quick recording session, so I didn't have time to dial in everything I really wanted. I probably would have auditioned some additional cymbals if I had extra time. Some of these ones were a little too zippy sounding for my taste, but I think it sounds pretty rad, and it captures the vibe of the band. And they were happy with it, so I'm happy with it. So next thing to talk about, before we get into a discussion of mastering, I just want to quickly mention some concepts about alternate mixes. Can we show a slide for the alt mixes? So there's a bunch of different reasons to do alternate mixes. If you're not sure about your vocal level, you might want to print an instrumental mix as well as an a cappella mix. If you think if your client or their record label or something asks for instrumentals, you want to print some instrumental mixes. Sometimes, publishing companies or marketing people want to like solicit things to various soundtracks, and a lot of those soundtracks will ask for instrumental mixes. So if you think there's any prayer of that being required, do it during the mix stage. Otherwise, you'll have to go back and do it later. Which, if you're mixing in the box and you still have access to all the same plugins that you did when you originally mixed it, you can do after the fact pretty easily. For me, where I'm mixing mostly on analog equipment, and returning to the mix to do an instrumental or an a cappella essentially means a full remix. So I try to make sure that any mixes somebody needs, I do in the moment. And also, I make sure that all my clients understand that with, it seems like people are very accustomed to in-the-box mixing now as clients. So I try to make sure they understand that I'm mixing using analog gear, so they really need to pay attention to the mixes that I'm providing them and make sure that they're happy with them, because if at a later date they decide they want the backing vocal a little louder or whatever, it's not possible without a full remix. And then if I do a full remix, I might fix the one little thing that they had an issue with, but maybe something else in the mix suffers, because it is a new mix and it's not going to sound exactly the same. If you're really unsure about some of those balances, you're not happy with your mix, or if the band's trying to get their song on Rock Band or something, Guitar Hero or whatever that is, you may want to do something called stems. And I played back stems for this song. I printed stems on this song only for demonstration purposes. It's not something that I do typically. But if you don't know what stem mixing is, what it is to create a stereo bounce of individual elements within the mix. So you're taking all of the processing that you're doing to tracks and then capturing that in the form of a wave file, typically a stereo wave file. So like I have a stereo file here that's a capture of all my drums with their processing on them, as well as my guitar, bass, and vocals. Some people will stem things out even further. They might have a rhythm guitar stem and a lead guitar stem, or they might have an effect stem separate from the tracks. They might have, for their drums, they might have a close mic stem and an ambient mic stem. There's no right or wrong way to print stems, and it's a way to give yourself additional control over the mix after the fact. And if I feel as though a band is going to be really indecisive about my mix, and I have the time to do it, I will print stems for the entire mix. And then if they have mix adjustments later, I'll go back in the box and combine the stems that I printed through my analog gear down to a new mix. If people need this done, make sure that they understand that it takes extra time to do this, and you can't just do it instantly. The last album that I recorded was I think about 63 minutes long. So if I were to print, a drum, bass, guitar, and vocal stem, that's an extra, at least an extra 4 hours of work running those stems. So make sure they understand that it takes some extra time, and if they need that they compensate you for it. And also be aware that mastering engineers don't usually like stems. It's more work for them. That does give them more control, but it's more work for them. And the other thing is that, think about the longer that you're on a project, the more emotionally invested you become in that project. If it's your band and you've written the songs and put the effort in the rehearsal space, sweating them out, and hacking your way through the songs, developing the song, and then recording the song. You spent a lot of time with these songs, and they're really important to you, and you're emotionally invested in them. If you're the recording engineer on those songs, maybe you spent a weekend or a week or a month or however long working on those songs, you've become emotionally invested in those songs. If you didn't write the songs or record them and you're just mixing them, you're maybe only spending a few days on those songs. And while I'm sure you take pride in your work, you don't have the same emotional connection to those songs because you haven't lived with the development of them. And then for a mastering engineer, they might master 1 to 4 albums per day. So you want to, while there's a lot of great mastering engineers who are super creative people, you want to treat the role of mastering not as a creative role, but as a sort of more a technician kind of role. Or it's a very technical side where they're trying to optimize what you've provided them, but they're not. A good mastering engineer is not trying to put their creative stamp on your creative output. They're just trying to optimize your creative output and make you look good. And the best mastering engineers know how to make you as a mix engineer look good, and they know when to do stuff, and they know when your mix is great, when it doesn't really need anything. So if you send mastering engineers stems, then you open up a huge amount of opportunity for the mastering engineer to impart their own creative input into your mix. And with them not being as emotionally invested in what the song is and where it should go, it's kind of giving them too much control. And I think that a good mastering engineer will be the first one to admit that that mastering from stems is oftentimes to do creative decisions that really are sort of beyond the scope of what their job is. And some of them are happy to do it, but just understand that it's maybe a little bit too much control for them. So try to avoid sending a mastering engineer stems if you can. If you do print stems, keep those stems for yourself. And if you're not happy with the master and you feel as though an adjustment with stems could do it, maybe do that by doing the stems on your end as opposed to the mastering engineer's end. One other thing that's kind of neat about stems is that if your tracks and if your stems and your mixes all line up together perfectly inside your DAW, you can actually blend a stem in with the final mix. So let's say you do a final mix, you think it's super rocking and it's awesome, but after mastering you realize, you know what, I wish the drums were just a little bit louder. You might, rather than do like a full stem remix, you might blend just a hair of the drum stem in with your final mix. And if they line up perfectly in your DAW, then there shouldn't be any phasing introduced into it in doing that. The other thing you can do is if you decide after mastering, like, oops, the drums are too loud actually, what you can do is invert the polarity of your drum stem and then subtly blend that in with the mix, and that will actually turn down the drums in the mix. It can be a can of worms because of stereo bus processing. This stem that you're blending in is not subject to the stereo bus processing that happened within your mix. So sometimes some weird stuff can happen, so be aware of that. So that's pretty much all I have to say about alternate mixes. So now, when it comes to mastering, your role is sort of relegated to being even with the band members. I think you have even say in the results of mastering as any of the other band members do. And ultimately, the final call for any of this stuff is up to the client. But it's your recording, it's your mix, it's your name on it. You want to make sure that you're satisfied with the results and that it sounds great. So try to help the client understand what mastering is. Help the client choose a good mastering engineer. If they ask you for some recommendations, you might want to recommend some people that you've worked with in the past that you are happy with and think do a great job mastering your mixes, then that you have a great working relationship with. A lot of clients are really, they don't understand what mixing and mastering is. They think it's part of the same process when it really is different. So make sure that they understand what it is about mastering that's different from mixing and how it's going to affect the finished product of their record, and what a mastering engineer is going to expect from them and what they can expect out of a mastering engineer. If you or any of your clients are really confused about the concepts of loudness and of compression, EQ, and limiting, Bob Weston, who's the bass player of Shellac, he has a mastering studio in Chicago called Chicago Mastering Service. And on his website, I've got a link to it up here. He has a really great graphical representation of what mastering is. And if I urge all of you to read it, and it'll help improve your understanding of mastering.
Let me also take this chance to plug Jesse Cannon's DIY mastering class.
Yes.
He talks about a lot of stuff. A lot of people turn up their nose at the idea of DIY mastering, but Jesse worked at West Side Music with Alan Douches for, I think, 4 years, something like that. So
Yeah.
he's one of the best in the business. There's no substitute for having somebody, like Alan master stuff, but there's a lot you can do at home too. So
Yeah.
check this out. Check out Jesse's class if you want to learn more about this.
Alan is awesome, and Jesse is awesome. Alan's mastered quite a few of my records, and so he really knows his stuff, and he's a great mentor for everyone who's gone through that studio. So yeah, definitely listen to what Jesse has to say, and I'm probably going to contradict some of what he has to say, but that's okay. We all have opinions.
I thought there was only one right way to make music.
Well, that's the thing about music, is it's this amorphous sort of subjective thing. We're talking about a lot of like really objective things, like how do you place a microphone, but like who cares? It's all about how does this music make you feel? And so you're doing all these technical tasks that have a very sort of subjective, amorphous goal. So there is no right or wrong answer. So listen to what Jesse has to say, and even though he's wrong, and just kidding, Jesse. Sorry, Jesse. Well, I'm actually going to get into. I think actually Jesse has a lot of really awesome stuff to say, and you can learn a ton from him. And I actually do a bunch of DIY mastering on my own, of my own recordings, not to release them, but so that I can sort of understand the mastering process better, so that I can be a better sounding board for the mastering engineers that I'm working with. And I think that's actually a really great reason to do DIY recording, DIY mixing, and DIY mastering, even if you don't intend to release that material, to be able to learn about those processes and increase your vocabulary as a musician, understand these processes, you can communicate with the people that you're working with better. Or maybe, like if you're like me, maybe you'll just find yourself working in music professionally, even though you didn't set out to. So anyway, Bob Weston from Shellac, his site's great. Check it out if you want to learn more about what mastering is. And if you need any records mastered, Bob is fantastic, and he has a lathe in his mastering studio, which a lot of studios don't have. So if you're doing vinyl, he's a good choice. So here's my thing that sort of, in a certain sense, contradicts what Jesse's talking about. DIY mastering, I think, is awesome for demos and for learning about the mastering process. But I think if you have created a mix that you are super proud of and you want to optimize that mix, you really want a second opinion on that mix. Whichever room you're working in, I don't care how great it is, it's not perfect. And whichever speakers you're listening on, I don't care how great they are, those speakers are not perfect. So there's a certain, and also your ears are not perfect, and your opinions and taste are not perfect. So there's a bunch of variables involved in your mix process that are out of your control. You're not hearing everything that's happening in your mix because of the sound of your room and your speakers. And your perspective on the mix is clouded by all that stuff, plus your perspective is clouded by your own personal tastes. So I think it's really important to have another person master the mixes that you're really proud of in a different space, with different ears and different speakers, because that's your second opinion. That's the person who's going to catch every little thing that you didn't catch in your room. Maybe you have some standing waves building up at certain frequencies in your controller, or maybe your speakers don't have the great stereo imaging, or have some sort of voids in certain frequencies. You might not catch some stuff that your mastering engineer in their room will catch. So I think it's great to have other people master your mixes if you can afford it, and if it's a mix that you're really proud of. And in a lot of cases, mastering isn't really that expensive. Yeah, like the dollar per hour figure is typically more than $1 per hour in a recording studio, but the amount of time that they spend on it is much less. So even though someone's $100 an hour or whatever, they might only spend four hours on it, as opposed to the weeks that you spend recording a record. Brad Boatwright, who I use quite frequently, and Jack Control also, they're in Carl Saff, they're all really cheap, very affordable guys. You can master an album with them for a few $100, which really isn't a whole lot of money. And I think it's worth it to have a professional, dedicated mastering engineer work on your record. And mastering really is its own specialized discipline. It has a lot of overlap with mixing, but it's a specialized discipline, and only a mastering engineer is really right for that. And you're going to get a better result with a great mastering engineer than you will trying to do it yourself. But still, I think DIY anything is awesome. I record music and play music and all that stuff because I wanted to do it myself. So if you want to get into yourself, go for it, but just be aware that maybe someone with more experience mastering might be better at handling your baby than you are. And that's sort of how I was actually with Converge mixes, you know. I've mixed the last, I think 3 Converge albums, or 3 or 4, something like that. But before that, I had other people working on the recordings and the mixing, even though I was already a recording engineer at that point. I knew that my ability levels were not yet at the point that the product of my band could be where I wanted it to be. So despite the fact that I had more invested in those songs than the tracking, mixing, and mastering engineers that we hired to do their work, those people's skill levels were beyond mine, and it was more important to me to get the product to be really awesome than it was for me to have my hands on every little step of the process. Okay, so another super important thing about mastering is the sequencing of the album.
Quick,
sure.
Just to let you know, Jesse is actually in the chat room, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
says, no contradiction. I agree with all of this.
Oh, cool, because I totally wanted to fight him.
Sorry, you have to fight about something else.
All right, we'll find something. Well, hey Jesse, thanks for watching. Sequencing, yes. Sequencing an album, well, you know, we used to listen to records on vinyl almost exclusively for a number of years. And one of the things about vinyl is, let's think geometry, okay? So a record is spinning, let's say it's a 45, you know, it's spinning 45 revolutions per minute. And remember your geometry class and you know, what a circumference is. It's a greater length of space going from, you know, point A all the way around to back to point A again when you're at the outside of the record. When you're at the inside of the record, you're still spinning at 45 BPM, but one revolution of that record is a shorter distance. So because of that, at the outside of the record, vinyl is actually capable of kind of handling more detailed information than it is towards the inside of the record. So that's why like 12 inches tend to have a higher quality sound than like 10 inches and 7 inches. And also faster spinning records are able to contain more high resolution information because there's more space to store those mechanical vibrations within the record. And because of that, typically, when people would sequence albums, when vinyl was the primary format, they would put really sort of up-tempo, high-energy songs at the beginning of each side, and then the end of each side would tend to have the more lower-energy songs, the slower songs, ballads, acoustic numbers, more mellow type stuff. And that was just a function of the sound quality of the album. The dense, fast stuff worked better on the outside of the record, and the less dense stuff was okay on the inside of the record. Just a happy accident, pacing an album works really well that way. It's nice to have the real high energy stuff to sort of set off the beginning of an album towards the beginning of the record, and then a little bit of a break kind of in the middle of the record, and then the beginning of the B-side, which is, you know, the middle of your CD or whatever, sort of bring it back to life. So a lot of times you'll have your strongest songs in position 1 and 2 on either side. So think about that stuff as you're creating a record, and also think about who your audience is. Are they intimately familiar with your band, and are they ready for your next record? Like if you're Neurosis, for example, or the Melvins, like you have like a ravenous fan base that are going to listen to the record from start to finish no matter what. And if you want to do a sort of sequence that eases them into the record and then peaks in the middle and then eases them out, you can do that. And because the people who love your band they love your band, and they're gonna follow you every step of the way. If your band is a little bit less proven and you're looking to make a great first impression, then you don't want to mess with your audience. You know, you might want to front load the record a little bit. I know that that's a lot of people's pet peeves, but I think that like the first 2 or 3 songs are super crucial. Give them, some people even, actually Todd from Nails, you know what he does? Every time he listens to a record, very first thing he does, track 2. Doesn't care about the baloney that people are doing on track 1. He thinks that like, because a lot of like metal records have stupid 1-minute intros at the beginning of them. Nobody cares. Just give me some good stuff right at the beginning of the record. So Todd skips to track 2 all the time, almost every time he listens to a new record. So your first few songs should be bangers. Depending on the length of those songs, I'm assuming that the first few songs are the shorter ones. Sort of show your audience that you mean business, and then by the time you get to tracks 3 or 4, maybe like, you know, somewhere between 5 and 8 minutes into the record, that's when you want to start showing some depth. So songs that are maybe a different tempo than what's typical of the record, or a different feel, or something that's a little bit, you know, out of left field. You want to bring that in somewhere around 3 and 4. You don't want to save all the oddballs for the end, because then people will just kind of shut off the record too early. But you want to kind of disperse that stuff throughout the course of the record. It's really hard, especially in this day and age when people don't tend to listen to albums. They mostly listen to individual songs. It's really hard to find a sequence that will both keep people interested over the course of the entire album, while also not being so diverse that it's off-putting. And, you know, like if someone's in a certain mood and then you just kick them out of that mood right away and then send them back to another mood, like it can be a little bit off-putting. So try to make it you know, a cohesive flow over the course of an album. So think about the keys of the songs as they relate to one another from song to song. Think about the tempos. One thing that I do related to tempo is if a song ends short, or if a song ends without like a retard at the end, sort of count out the ending of song 1 and then make song 2 come in on beat. Maybe it's 2 beats, maybe it's 4 beats, maybe it's 8 beats, but it'll help. It's a very subtle thing, but it'll help the record feel cohesive if you don't just like fade out the end of the song 1, wait 5 seconds, and then bring in song 2. You know, count time so that song 2 comes out of song 1 in a logical fashion. And do that over the course of the whole record and make it feel like one cohesive piece of music. Give people a reason to listen to the whole album as opposed to individual songs. And the final thing I want to say about mastering is to be accountable. If it's your mix on the record and the master isn't really turning out so hot, just be the first one to raise your hand and say, hey guys, look, it's not the mastering engineer's fault, or maybe it's not the mastering engineer's fault, maybe it's my fault. Let me try to mix this again. Or say, you know, hey, I should have recorded this another way and I apologize, but I think that this is the best he can do with the master. Maybe that's the case, but be willing to accept blame. And if you have a trusting working relationship with your clients, they shouldn't be too upset with you. They should be, you know, again, it goes back to keeping them in the loop. Don't deflect blame onto them or to your mastering engineer. Just be willing to accept that maybe things are your responsibility. So, that being said, let's check out some of the mastering iterations that happen with this record. Before I play any of these things, I want to say that I've kind of I've turned down all the masters 6.5 decibels inside Pro Tools. So as I toggle between the different masters and the mixes, you're going to hear them at sort of this close to the same perceived volume. So because it's really important to let your client know that your mix volume is not the master volume. You know, a lot of times the first mix comment you get is like, dude, it's not that loud, but it's the mix phase. It doesn't matter. So use the volume knob on your stereo to adjust for that. Doesn't matter the output of the mix. So I've done a little bit of work inside Pro Tools just to sort of compensate for that mix versus master volume, and yeah. And so let's check that out. I'll play you guys the. You know what? I'm going to switch over to XOR solo mode, and I'll play you the final mix, and then I'll play you the 3 iterations of the master. The first one was very true to the mix, and then the guys chimed in that they wanted it still even a little bit glossier. So the second master was quite a bit glossier and sizzlier. I asked Brad to go back, Brad Boatwright from Audio Siege, who mastered it. I asked him to go back and see if he could maintain that brightness but reduce some of the sizzle. And I think he actually went in with a dynamic EQ and sort of sought the hi-hat frequency and was able to kind of turn down that frequency whenever the hi-hat was being played. So kind of a neat little trick of his. So let's check out a little bit of the final mix, and then I'll toggle over to each of the three masters. So keep that in mind. It's going to keep getting brighter. Let's just go back to that last section and hear the difference between Master 2 and 3. That's with the dynamic EQ on the hi-hat. Whoops, a little further back. Oh, remix. Remix. It's super subtle, but there's just sort of an improvement in the sort of over-the-top sizzle happening in the hi-hat range. So let's just do another quick one where we go all the way from raw tracks. Oh, explosions. Okay, and then final mix. And final master. All right, so that's pretty much the evolution of what I did on this song. And we have reached the end of my prepared material.
That is fantastic.
Yay!
I love it. Yay for Kurt.
All right, I hope all of the questions are short because I have to pee desperately.
Great. Well, I think I've got, okay, so I've got one kind of final question that I want to ask.
Okay.
It's kind of early on in the...
Hold on, I'm gonna unbutton my pants first.
Okay. Hey, it's your day. You can do whatever you want, buddy. Kind of early on when you were showing us the evolution of the mix, like really early on, Bright Black Earth and Pataton point out, like, holy crap, if that was my final mix, I'd be totally stoked on that, and Pataton said me too. So the question is, how do you know when you're done? How do you know when you like are ready to pass it on to somebody else and need to stop working on it? Because we can work on our stuff forever.
Yeah, and that's actually one great advantage to working in the analog domain, is that the mix has to be done at a certain time, especially like, I mean, I'm pretty busy in my studio, so I can't leave the gear patched in indefinitely, you know, like I'm flying home tomorrow and then I start recording a band the very next day. And then I'm going to be recording them, and then I might have a day or two off, and then I start on the next band. So the mix really needs to get finalized within the time they've booked. Otherwise, you know, because I have to unpatch everything and move on to my next project. If you're mixing in the box, then yeah, mixes can just drag on over and over and over again. And so I think it's really important to sort of set limits for your clients, make sure they understand that your time is valuable, and that there's sort of like a limit to how much you can do. And yeah, so just, but it's certainly a tough thing to manage. The better recorded things are, the less you have to do in mixing. So as I've become more experienced at recording, I've become more brave in the choices that I make when I'm tracking to push me in the right direction in mixing, so I don't have to do quite as much while I'm mixing. And then if you're tracking a band live, you can be even more brave because you really have a great sense of what the final mix is going to be while you're tracking it. And then it's really just a matter of sort of balancing things and optimizing them. Yeah.
That's awesome. So we've been here for 2 days. Do you have any kind of final thoughts?
Final thoughts.
Kind of wrap things up, put a bow on it.
Yeah, I think I kind of set it up at the beginning of this segment, my final thoughts, but yeah, it's really, recording is a super complicated thing that's requires control of a lot of different elements. You know, you're dealing with human beings who have a great amount of emotional investment in these songs that they've created. These songs are a representation of who they are. And they have, if you are, whether you're a member of that band or a recording engineer that's been tasked with recording this band, you have a great responsibility in order to help these people see their artistic vision through to the end. And hopefully you enjoy who the people are and you enjoy the music that they're making and can really invest yourself and enjoy the process of making songs with these people. And I would urge all of you to consider yourself an additional band member in the process, and to treat them and treat their songs like you would want someone else to treat your songs. If people see that you care and you demonstrate that you believe in what they're doing, then they'll trust in you, and your working relationship with them will be better. And try to have fun and enjoy your life and enjoy the music that you make, because if you enjoy what you're doing, the quality of your work will be much better. And then in addition to that, always keep your mind open and always keep your ears open to new techniques, new ideas, new equipment, all that stuff, because in addition to all of these sort of social tasks of recording and interacting with the human beings that you're working with, you are also required to do a lot of technical stuff. You need to solder and make cables and patch in compressors and equalizers and choose the right equalizer to use and the right reverb. And it's a interesting and complicated job because it has so many facets. And it's a lifelong pursuit, and I, if you're into recording music, I hope you stick with it, and I hope you recognize that much like playing an instrument, there's never a point that you have learned how to record. You're always in the process of learning, and like doing this class for me has been a great learning experience. It's helped me, I've learned a lot from just talking with these guys and from the questions I've been asked, but also having to organize my thoughts in preparation for this class has helped me learn about sort of the interdependency of all of the different elements of recording music. So it's been a great experience, and I hope you guys have all gotten something out of it, and I hope to see you guys doing things like this in the future, and hopefully I can learn from you.
I love that. Thank you for those thoughts. Thank you for the 2 days.
Yes.
Thank you for being here, for all the hard work that you do put into it. I want to thank everybody out there for joining us for these 2 days. It's been awesome to have your conversation and feedback and thoughts and questions in the chat room as well. You guys are awesome. I really enjoy hanging out here and learning alongside of you. Thank you again to everybody here in the room for joining us as well. It's been a great couple days. Now, tomorrow, I know that we've got another audio workshop coming up. We've got Travis Kasperbauer coming to teach an Intro to Logic Pro 10. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, the class is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, which is if you want to learn how to use Logic Pro 10, then this is the place to go. So it's a fairly introductory class. So if you are brand new to Logic, it's great for you, or if you know somebody who is. If you are an experienced Logic user, he is going to talk about some of the features that are new to 10, but it's really for people who are totally new to Logic. So check it out. By the end of the class, you'll be able to record vocals and instrument, program a beat with whatever the new drum thing is built into Logic, and be all set to roll. So if you know anybody who wants to learn Logic 10, that's the place to do it.
Yeah, and I would just ask, on a personal level, if you know people who would gain something from this sort of experience here at Creative Live, share our link with them. That's how we've grown. That's how we've been able to bring in people like Kurt, is by just sharing the word and really getting people to know about what's going on here and what we're offering, the value here. So let people know about this, your friends, your bandmates. Spread the word. I want to say a couple things that people have said to you, Kurt, about this course. First of all, Bright Black Earth says, Kurt, send me your PayPal so I can buy you a week's worth of coffee and vegan takeout. So people love that.
GodCity@AOL.com.
There you go. Adrian Cooper says, thanks, Kurt. I've been struggling with my recordings in my humble home studio for some time now, and now I feel like I have the tools I've been missing to get my projects going. I'm very excited to continue working now.
Great, thanks.
That's the goal right there. And then Andrew Sudol says, you've actually taught me more useful things in this 2-day class than what I learned in my college career. I really thank you a whole lot for doing this class and giving me some really helpful hints, tricks, and even some new technique, and love the work you do.
Awesome.
So again, if all of you out there want to say thank you to Kurt, go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/creativelive. There's a picture of Kurt there that you can leave a comment and let him know what this course has meant to you. A bunch of you have already done that, and I thank you for that. We'll make sure that Kurt gets to see that after the course ends. But this is the end of the free portion of this course. This is how Creative Live works, is as we are live, as we are broadcasting this, recording it, as we're going through the process, you guys can join us, be a part of this, share your thoughts, your questions, your comments, and really just help to shape the course. Now what we're going to do is, after we wrap shortly, we'll start the rebroadcast. We'll rebroadcast this day throughout the night until the class starts tomorrow. So you're absolutely welcome to check that out and relearn the stuff that you've seen. However, if you want to have anytime access to this course and be able to watch it at your own rate, be able to re-see any part that you need as you go forward. If you're somebody like Andrew who has already gone through this and really just, this is such a efficient presentation and really just an in-depth exploration, and you want to be able to use it, or if you're someone like Adrian who's been struggling and just needs the help, needs the tools, you can have this in your toolbox and be able to reference it at any time. Purchase anytime access to this 2-day course by clicking the buy button directly below this video feed. Cost is $99. And for that, you can stream the videos or download them at your own rate anytime you want and for as often as you want. We don't limit how often you can stream or download the files. In addition, we are also including his reverb impulses that he has recorded himself at God City. So that is an awesome bonus that you get for purchasing that anytime access. So again, it costs $99 for the 2 days, but you can get it at the discounted live price of $79 if you buy it now. That price is good through tomorrow morning. So go ahead and make that decision now, and just think about what you would, in the future as you're working, what you might want to be able to relearn and re-see. So again, everybody, we want to give a final thank you again to everybody involved with this. Big thank you to Kurt, and we will see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Pacific, same time here on Creative Live for Travis Casper Hour. But for now, for Gear Gods Studio Pass with Kurt Ballou, we want to say that's a wrap. Thanks, everyone.